Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Think Business. Looking forward to co-hosting with Mick Narouche, COO of Brightwing, great talent agency, recruiting people and changing lives. Together, we are interviewing Brian Miller. Brian, it's great to connect with you, founder, CEO of Clarity Up, Just Say the Thing, as well as TED Talk presenter. And back about 9 years ago, you did a TED Talk, How to Magically Connect with Anyone. And it's gotten 3.6 million views. I was introduced to you through Aaron Chernow with Brightwing. He was introduced to it by Mick from Brightwing. And I interviewed Aaron. He talked about it a couple of years ago. I then wrote a blog on your TED Talk. And then 2 years later, you found it and reached out to me. And here we are all talking. So, and so I thought it'd be fun for Mick, who kind of was the originator of finding this TED Talk, to talk with us. And so I'm glad the three of us are talking because Mick, with recruiting, it's so relevant, this TED Talk. And Brian, to kick everything off, I would love to talk to you about this piece of your TED Talk. Your TED Talk, which I loved, I've watched it a couple of times, How to Magically Connect with Anyone. You did your TED Talk 9 years ago. And now 9 years later, what's the same and what has changed on how to connect with people?
What a great question, John. Thanks for having me. And Mick, it's great to see you. I appreciate you putting my talk out there into the world in front of people. It's wild. What's changed dramatically, I think, are two big things. Since my talk came out, it came out right at the beginning of a big shift. And I think that's partly why it went viral. It was like right place, right time, 2015, right as the world was becoming visibly distracted and divisive in kind of creating the world that we now live in. I think two big things have changed. One, there's been a dramatic increase in noise. Just an insane increase in noise. The world has never been more noisy. It's harder and harder to get through. People don't have as much time, as much patience as they've ever had. And there's been a dramatic decrease in trust. So people just don't trust anyone. We don't trust institutions, experts, scientists, each other, strangers. We don't trust our neighbors anymore, right? So I think those two things have both made human connection much, much more difficult and much more important at the same time.
It's interesting. So your business is Clarity Up. Just say the thing. I'm emphasizing you don't necessarily emphasize it, but I'm emphasizing it. And, saying the thing that grabs people's attention, that does, the attention span today is less than a goldfish, less than 7 seconds. You don't have a lot of time to make a first impression. You don't have a lot of time to capture and keep attention. And so how do you guide your people with Clarity Up to build trust faster and to navigate through the noise?
Yeah, so it comes from both angles. And so what's interesting is that for me as a personal brand, I am still a keynote speaker on human connection. I do corporate culture, patient experience, I do talks on human connection. And that's interpersonal, that's at the human level. And then the company that I run is a consulting firm that does message clarity. So it's like how to connect with people, but in the business context as communicators. So I do both sides of it. And so the advice that I would give immediately is, one, if you want to be a great communicator when you're doing the talking, you have to get really good at listening. Yeah. You have to know what people want. You have to know what they believe, what they fear, and what they're struggling with. Those are the four that we identify as psychographics. There's more psychographics than that, but those are the four that we focus on. Beliefs, fears, wants, and problems. And you don't know what people want, what they're struggling with, what they're worried about, or what they believe unless you're listening. So the first step is you have to listen. And we could talk about that for 4 hours. But then, once you have listened, in order to connect with them quickly, you need to say things that immediately and obviously speak to the things that they want, struggle with, fear, and believe. And so it's both of those things. It's like, get rid of all the fluff. People don't have time. Later, once they feel connected with you, they'll let you tell a 20-minute tangent story about that weird Thanksgiving with your aunt, and it's only loosely related to the conversation, but not initially. People don't have that time anymore. So it's like, figure out what they want, struggle with, believe or fear, and then just say the thing that tells them you're listening.
Yeah, Brian, a question that I have, and just one of the main takeaways from the video, and I thought it was tremendous, and it was hugely popular with my group and our organization when I showed it. And it was all about the theme of the year, and we do an annual summit. And every year we do one of those annual summits, we always have a theme for the year, right? And that year was about relationshiping and building relationships. We're a sales organization, and it's about connecting with people, really, at the end of the day, as you highlight. One of the interesting things was just on perspective taking, and one of the takeaways on that video. Can you kind of elaborate on that and just talk a little bit more about that? Because I think that's a really, really important piece to this.
Yeah. Thanks, Mick. So perspective taking, when I give my live presentations, I always give people a chance to raise their hand and give me a definition. What do you think perspective taking means? And I always say, bonus point if you just flip the words. Right? It's taking perspective.
That's kind of how I answered in my IQ test when I took it years ago.
That's right.
When my therapist asked me what it meant, we kept on flipping the word. We have a problem here, John.
Yeah. So what's interesting is that people expect someone like me, a human connection specialist, to talk about empathy. It's a word that doesn't show up in the entire 75 minutes I'm on stage doing a keynote. I don't think it's mentioned in my book at all, apart from talking about why I don't talk about it. Empathy gets people all mixed up. When you talk about empathy, what you're talking about are feelings. Do you know how to feel what another person feels, or imagine feeling what they feel? And some of us just aren't good at that. Some of us are just kind of born more in touch with our feelings. Some of us aren't. Some of us have done work in therapy. Some of us haven't. So when you tell people to be more empathic, it's just this terrible advice that makes people shrink down and feel weird, especially in the workplace, right? So instead, what I talk about is perspective taking, which is a skill. It's not a feeling, it's a skill. And because it's a skill, you can learn it, hone it, develop it, and if not master it, certainly get very good at it. So perspective taking is the skill of understanding the point of view of another person. That's it. It's just, do you understand the point of view of another person? And the key to perspective taking is something I actually learned from my wife, who is a therapist. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist. And what they're taught as therapists, as a fundamental principle, is you actually can never truly understand the perspective of another person. You don't have their lived experience. You could imagine what you would do in their situation, but you're always looking through your own lens. And so perspective taking is, even though that's the official term, it's a bit of a misnomer. It's really perspective getting that we want to do. And so the key to it is you take on other people's perspectives by getting really good at asking them questions, asking good follow-up questions, and letting them share their perspective with you. That's the tool.
I love that. It reminds me of the Coveyism, which is one of my favorites. And I think many people, including me, you kind of have to stop and pause, seek first to understand before being understood.
Yep, I referenced it in my TEDx. It's old, cliched, borderline boring advice in 2025.
But that's the advice that I think works, because those are the reminders that we forget about, because everybody's moving so quickly. And I think you bring up a really good point that nobody understands anybody else's journey because, the way everybody has different triggers. And so my question to you is, how do you, when you're teaching perspective taking, perspective getting, how do you teach people to not put their own judgment in it and kind of find the pause within it? You know what I mean? Like almost like the pause meaning, okay, I have to create a pause in this so I can almost reflect on my own judgment, take my own judgment out of it so I can get back to perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cleaner perspective. Right.
Yeah. So great. So a few different, what a great question, John. So a few different things on that. One is the goal of connection is not agreement. It is understanding. And that's really important, that framing. The goal of connection is not agreement. The reason that we feel this need to put our own judgment on it and to immediately to respond to somebody instead of just making sure that we understood them is because we're trying to get them to agree with us. We're trying to get them to fit into our worldview. Yeah. And somewhere along the way, we got confused about this, that somehow you can only connect with someone if you agree with them or if you have all these things in common with them. In fact, I learned this as a magician. This is the craziest lesson that came out of being a professional magician for 10 years. If I try to show another magician a magic trick, it's not going to work. Why isn't she going to be able to appreciate the magic if I show her a trick? Because she knows all the same things I do. We share our perspective because she knows all the same secrets and all the same stuff. And because we share a perspective, she can't see the magic. It is only when I'm in front of an audience of people who do not understand the secrets, who don't know the perspective I have, I don't share their perspective, they don't share mine. Because of that, I can create a magical experience for an audience. We connect with people not in spite of our differences, but because of them. That's where the fun is. Yeah. But if you're going for agreement, you get yourself all kinds of screwed up. Yeah. And so the other framing that I really like for people is view yourself as a collector of stories. It's a title you can give yourself. You can go, I'm a collector of stories. And if you're a collector of stories, it doesn't matter if you find this person interesting, if you find their job interesting. You meet people, someone introduces you, somebody asks the world's worst question, what do you do? It's the world's worst question, right? There's no worse question than that. You say, what do you do? And they say, I'm an question. Right? It's a terrible question.
What do you do?
I do entire 90-minute workshops just on how to answer that question and how to ask a better one. It's brutal. But let's say you have that. You ask, because what do you do? And they say, I'm an accountant. And you're like, cool. I don't care. You know what I mean? Like, who cares? Right. You're an accountant. Especially if you're an accountant. I definitely don't care, right? It's like, with due respect to my accountant, who I love dearly. But it's like, I'm not interested. So what happens if somebody tells you what they do, tells you about a passion they have? You're talking to a Gen Z who starts to tell you about something they love on TikTok, and you're like, I don't know anything about this. Most people shut down. The conversation ends. But if you view yourself as a collector of stories, you ask different questions. You don't have to find what they said interesting. You don't even have to agree with it. You just have to be curious why they're interested in it.
Yeah.
Your job is to collect stories. So you ask different questions. And what happens when you get people to tell you about their passions and why they're interested in that thing, and they dig a level or two deeper and they start to share what sounds like values and beliefs, and we really connect with people over values and beliefs, not the superficial, we both like the Giants, stuff that most people think. By the way, if you're a Giants fan like I am, boy, it's been a tough couple of years. After the fourth game this season, I said to my wife, you can cancel Hulu Live. We're good. We'll turn it back on next year.
This is one of the few years we can say we're proud Lions fans.
Yes. There you go.
It's been a lot of years for us to be able to say that in public.
So. Yes, absolutely.
There you go. Enjoy it. But so collector of stories. That's a framing to help people get away from the judgment and just start to understand, what do people actually care about? What do they believe in? What do they value?
So I want to bring Mick into this conversation a little bit more, and Brightwing, because I think a lot of things you're talking about, when it comes to people interviewing people and people getting interviewed, there's so much of what you're talking about that lives in that circle of Mick's world. Mick, any questions on that? I think, I don't think a lot of people, I think Brightwing does a phenomenal job. I'm going to give them a little plug because I have referred them to clients. I have watched I'm friends with the Chernows, but I have also referred them clients and watched their process and hire great people. And it's incredible. And I think you need a third party resource because most people do not know how to interview people. They don't know what to ask. They don't know what to listen for. Everything you're talking about, I think, hiring great is so hard today. So I don't mean to like overly plug Brightwing. I'm not like here to give them like, but I think it's so hard. Well, but it's so difficult that you need somebody who's not in the inside world running with 15 different hats on their head. And to your point, how to listen, what to ask for, perspective, listening to what's not being said. So how are you seeing this, Mick, into your world take shape?
Yeah, I mean, like I'd mentioned before, I mean, we are recruiters, but we're really a sales organization. So we are always developing relationships with both candidates and clients and trying to bring the right parties together and finding that right fit. And I think that's where I think some organizations struggle, is they don't even know how to self-identify what that right fit is, right? Yeah. It's just like, here's my standard 10 questions HR gave me. I'm going to zip through them. We'll see how they do. And, if they do a good job, maybe they'll work out here, right? And it's like kind of more wishful thinking than it is actually digging into and asking deep questions and getting to the root of, what is somebody really looking for? What are they truly good at? Like, what kind of an environment are they going to thrive in? What type of leadership are they going to perform best in? And do you have that? So the fun for us is that we get to not only talk to great candidates, but really work with organizations to understand who they are in a lot of cases, because it's hard for them to self-identify that. But it's also like, we're working with them over the duration of our relationship. And some of them we've had for 25, 30 years now. And it's because we ask these questions, right? We get in deep and we work with them on understanding, maybe there's some changes that need to be made. Maybe there's some things and other things they have to think about to attract the type of talent that's going to take them where they want to go. So I do think it's just understanding who you are in a lot of cases and not just settling for the next thing.
Yeah.
That we find ourselves doing a lot. And that's kind of, I don't want to call it a secret sauce, but I think a lot of organizations, like you said, John, they just really struggle.
They struggle
to identify that and even understand themselves. And I think that's where it starts. One of the challenges for us too, and, maybe this is a question for Brian, post-COVID, it's so much more impersonal interactions these days. And you can throw on a Teams and you can still see somebody, but a lot of the things that you identify, Brian, in not only your TED Talks, but some of your other talks is just, kind of understanding and seeing that visual versus emotional perspective, right? And kind of understanding a person. And it's so hard to do, even on a Zoom or a Teams call or something to where you're not sitting in the same room and can get real deep with somebody. And that's one of the challenges. Like, I think we're doing a good job of overcoming that, but it's definitely been a challenge for us. And I don't know if other people have seen that, but.
Well, to your point though, Mick, about, this is hot water here. Like we're wading into controversial territory with the remote work versus return to the office stuff right now. And the problem is, like, for the most part, the data on people's mental health does not support how people answer the question. So, like, when you ask people, what do you want? And they say, everybody wants to work remote. Everyone says, I want to work remote. Flexibility, time at home, in my pajamas, get stuff done in between meetings, laundry, all this stuff.
Sure.
But we have a mental health emergency. Everybody's in trouble. I mean, just everybody's in trouble. And so it's like, what people say they want and what they actually need are very, very different things. And obviously, and I hate the word obviously, but obviously the answer is some hybrid. Like, people want the flexibility of being able to be at home and do some of the chores and be relaxed. But it's too trite to say that remote is best for efficiency and in person is best for collaboration. Like, it's not perfectly split like that. But the way I think about it when it comes to connection and the loneliness epidemic and how much mental health impacts people's productivity, their enjoyment of their job, all these things, is that, yes, we can we can connect with each other over Zoom. We can. But the depth and the quality of that connection is very different.
Yeah.
It's like you can get calories from McDonald's, but you probably shouldn't do it for every meal every day, right? Like you're not going to feel good. And
Right.
so, yes, we can, like, we made it through the pandemic, but I think we kind of learned the wrong lesson. We learned we can do it, but I think the lesson that everybody seemed to learn is, oh, then we should do it. Now that we know we can, we should always do this. And it's like,
Right.
the biggest thing that I
Well
saw
said.
during the pandemic and that I've seen since carrying on is what's missing when you're working remote is the in-betweenness. It's the inefficient things. It's the walking into a meeting, chatting with the person who happens to be right next to you as you're walking in. It's the packing up your stuff and the quote unquote water cooler. And I know there's gonna be tons of people who are, workers who are gonna say to me, that was never the case. And what do you know? You've never even had a job. And that's true. Fair enough. But I think people really miss and feel the lack of the in-betweenness, which is where real connections are made. You click onto the Zoom call, everybody just appears. We do our stuff. We get through our thing, and then everybody goes, bye. And then you hit a button and you're just immediately out of it. We're not built for that. That's not how humans work.
Right.
The Surgeon General finally in 2023 recognized officially that there's a loneliness epidemic, and that was great. It's important that he did that, and he's been writing about it and putting out new research. But I was kind of here like, I've been talking about this since 2015. I'm just some idiot. Like I'm some magician, and I knew this. Like, how did it take so long to talk about this?
Right.
But one of the things he mentioned recently when he was interviewed is he mentioned that I think it was the Surgeon General that mentioned this. If not, don't quote me. But that solitary confinement is the worst punishment you can give to a human being. What does that tell us? Putting a person alone in a room with no human contact is the worst possible thing you can do to a human being. Why? Because we need each other. And so, yeah, hybrid's probably the answer, but I think more people who think they want to be remote need to recognize a little bit more explicitly what we're missing when we're not together. So.
That is we'll see how that plays out. I think my son is about to graduate college, and him, along with a lot of his friends, are looking to be in the office full time. They'd like to be in the office. Some of the places he's interviewing are hybrid, 1 or 2 days a week. But, to me, I think the best place to learn and grow is in an office. And then there is room for hybrid. I'm not suggesting there's not, but I think if you're a new salesperson or a new manager, that's the place to learn. So last question, and I want to have you on again because I love everything that we're talking about. Communication, I think, one of the things that I think people struggle with today, to your point and what Mick's talking about, is those in-between conversations, those small 30-second conversations that really glue people together. I see kind of in my work as a business coach, the ripple effect of that, making it harder for people to engage in a conversation, know how to start a conversation. And so in your way of teaching, how would you suggest and recommend that people start a conversation today? Because it's not like you said, hey, what do you do? So how do you start a conversation today?
Yeah. That's a great question. I have both a very flippant answer and a very deep, very long answer. So I'll try to strike a balance.
We'll take number one and a bridge version of number two.
Yeah. So the flippant answer is, how do you start a conversation? Hi, I'm Brian.
Right. Yeah.
And that's but really, I actually teach this to adults, like to full-grown adult professionals. That's part of a program that I teach when I get brought in. People don't know how to walk up to a stranger or even like a new colleague and say hello. Hi, I'm Brian. You know what happens is people find there's no other way to respond to that than for someone to say, hi, and give you their name. And that is all you need to start talking. That is it. Right. I'm a big fan of small talk. I've been talking about this for years. There's been this weird push, especially in like TED platforms over the last 5 or 6 years, to have big talk, to go right to a deep, meaningful question. I'm like, it's nonsense.
Yeah.
It's wrong. The weather, the traffic, it's fine. The key, and here's the abridged version of the second answer, the key is to take the small talk and make it meaningful, take it a step deeper as quickly as possible. So somebody says, the weather, right? Some nonsense that we say to each other. It's raining. Can't believe how raining it is, and and you can say, yeah, totally, but you could say, well, what type of weather do you prefer? Like, you could just say, what type of weather do you prefer? And they go, oh, actually, I kind of like snow. And I go, really? You like snow? And they go, yeah. And I go, well, why do you like snow? And they go, well, I grew up in Colorado and I have these memories of skiing with my dad. Boom. Stranger, values, it took 20 seconds. Mm-hmm. It's learning how to ask an interesting follow-up question and not getting stuck at the superficial.
And I think that is, we should have I want to have you back because that's something to talk about, I'm a business coach. I work with a lot of salespeople. I work with managers, executives, owners. I'm not saying that to impress, just to impress upon the following. One of the things that I find is that people have a really hard time getting to the second question, getting to the transition statement. I work with a lot of people on that where they'll say, well, I said this, but what do I say next? And so I think it's the phones. It's a post-COVID world. We lost that kind of walking in and out of the conference room, coffee room talk, where we learn those skills. Yeah.
We stopped having interactions and we started having transactions, and that's where everything went off a cliff.
Yeah. All right. Mick, last question for Brian.
I just appreciate being a part of this. This has been great. And Brian, I agree with you. One of the biggest challenges for us, and not to harp on the whole post-COVID environment, but, as a leader and a developer of people, it's so hard to do that remotely. And, I do think that I hear more people saying, hey, I want to be back in the office. I need to be with people. I need to, have that interaction again. So I'm hoping there is some light at the end of the tunnel here with some of this. Yeah. But I guess just a last question just would be, as things will continue to evolve and change 5 years from now from what we experience today, what is that common thread or theme to what you teach people that will outlast any of these different changing times and things like that, I guess is.
Yeah, and I can answer that pretty quickly. It's the same answer I've been given since like 2015, 2016, way before the pandemic. I mean, it's predated all of that. It's the same answer as the world, as every industry and most organizations are desperately trying to push humanity out of the equation by automating and AIing and roboting and all the stuff we're doing. I have been predicting this, and I stand by it more today than I ever have. The companies that double down on humanity, that double down on the ability to make people feel heard, understood, and valued, both their own team and their customers and their clients, they're going to win in the long run. The robots will lose.
Yeah, I'll add on. I agree with that. I'll add on two thoughts to that question, Mick, which I think is we all have a responsibility, and it's never been easier to grow our own skill set. And if everybody spends 1 to 5 minutes a day doing that, then we can stay ahead of the skill set. And then the next thing I'll suggest is everybody needs to work on growing their courage, because it's the courage to just take action on things that become that's a really important skill set. And I think it's really important. All right, let's do a quick speed round. I'll ask the first question. Mick, think of a question while I'm asking mine. Brian, a book. Well, first of all, you said you had a book. I didn't know you had a book. So what's your book?
My book's way up at the top of that thing, way back there. It's called 3 New People: Make the Most of Your Daily Interactions and Stop Missing Amazing Opportunities. It was published in 2018. Seth Godin blurbed it and put it on his blog as one of the 2019 books to read. So that was kind of cool. So
wait, give the name of it again.
3 New People. Yeah, and the title came from the fact, not the prescription, but the fact that on average over the course of our lives we meet 3 new people every day. It averages out over the course of our lives.
Good. I'm going to buy it right now. I didn't know you had a book. Well,
I don't talk about it enough. My management's always like, you don't talk about your book enough. So there you go.
Listen, I don't even think it's on your website. I couldn't find it on your website.
It's on there somewhere.
You got to get it more. All right. So a different book that's had an impact on you.
All right. So on the note of Seth Godin, he's gone from a hero to a mentor to something of a friend, as much as someone like that can be a friend. And anything he's ever written. But The Practice is a book not enough people talk about. It's one of his newer books. It's beautiful. It's about shipping creative work. And I would argue the vast majority of us are in creative work these days, even if you don't think you are. Because if you're interacting with people, you're doing something creative.
So The Practice by Seth Godin. So a couple things about Seth Godin. One, I love his work. I've loved it since day one. Yeah. I've actually emailed him a couple of times to be on my podcast. I love him. He wrote a book. I started an internet company in 1995. And around that time, he wrote a book called Permission Marketing. And permission marketing was so ahead of its time, because what it said was that what we're going to start to see is, if you like this, then other people like this. So you also may like what they like. And it was such a foreign concept at the time. Like, who would have thought that we would be where we are today based on that? But all of his work is great and solid and great. And
so permission marketing is amazing. The Practice is relatively recent. It's about creative work. If you don't see yourself as a creative person, the book you should read from Seth is Linchpin. That is probably the book that changed my life the most of any traditional nonfiction book. Linchpin is about how to be indispensable.
Yeah.
And if you're the person that's why I say, if you're the person that makes everyone in your life feel heard, understood, and valued, you don't have to build a culture of connection. You can become a culture of connection. And it really makes a difference.
Yeah. And I'll say this about him. I listen to a lot of books, but his books, there's something about the way he writes. Yeah. I love to read his books. Yeah. Yeah, totally. There's something about the way he writes. Okay. Yeah. All right, Mick.
I guess the question I have, and maybe even more so for me, if I need, what should I call Brian and some of the services that you provide?
Sure.
And just maybe a little bit more on that. I mean, what are some critical, I guess, how are you helping other organizations? Yeah. And if somebody needs help doing what, they should give Brian a call.
Totally. So as a keynote speaker, I work on, and I do workshops and keynotes on human connection. So if you're an organization, and I've worked with as small as 5 people in a local company and as large as brands that have 100,000 employees and, do $80 billion a year and all that, Jeff. So I can do any version of it. If you're looking to build a truly connected culture that will stand the test of time, like we were talking about, and what you need is not an organizational consultant. I'm not an organizational psychologist. What you need is someone to align your team, from the leadership to the janitor and everybody in between, around this North Star of human connection, making meaningful connections with each other, even in brief, or especially in brief periods of time, because we don't have a lot of time anymore. I'm your guy. The keynote is high energy. I use magic in it. I tell crazy stories. I bring up audience interaction. There's workshop elements in it. I've been the top rated speaker at every event and conference that we've tracked metrics for 8 or 9 straight years. And it's a great time. So
it's great.
We have a lot of fun.
It's great.
Last question. Best piece of wisdom you've ever received?
My wife was pregnant in January of 2020. We decided that 2020 we were finally going to start a family. That was going to be our year. All of our friends and cousins had 3 kids already, 8, 10, 9, 10-year-olds. And so when the world fell apart, I lost my life's work overnight. 18 months of speaking contracts were gone in an instant. I got a baby on the way as the primary breadwinner. I mean, my wife works, of course, but just due to the nature of my work, and I had to figure out what to do, and big panic, rebuilding my business. In that moment, I was giving a virtual weeks before my son's due date, I was giving a virtual workshop. And before we went live, I asked the host, who also had a baby due in just a few weeks, but it was his second, and it was my first. And I said to him, we were both about to go into the COVID hospital world and had no idea what was happening.
So crazy, yeah.
I was so scary. And I said, you're going through this for a second time. What's your number one piece of parenting advice for me? I'm becoming a first-time dad. I'm real nervous. It's COVID. We're not going to have any help. What do I do? And he paused, and then he said, word for word, parent the baby in your arms, not the baby in your head.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
It was one of the most impactful sentences anybody has ever said to me. And I've carried that now into every interaction, not just as a parent, but it's like, oh, be a friend to the person who's in front of you, not the friend that's in your head. Yeah. Right? Be a spouse to your actual spouse, not the spouse in your head. It's really powerful, that framing.
Great. Brian, I'm so glad that I interviewed Aaron Chernow 2 years ago or longer at this point, that Mick found your TED Talk. It ended up to me. We blogged it. You found it on LinkedIn a couple years later.
Crazy.
We ended up today on this talk. I loved it. And you got to come back and we can dive into a lot more of these topics. I want to highlight a couple of things. I love this podcast because I get to talk to interesting people all over the world who are in alignment with my purpose in my business, which is working with successful people who are stuck and getting them unstuck. And so I get to talk to guests like you, and Mick, have you along as well to help people get unstuck. One of the things you said, a lot of amazing things today that were really impactful. I just want to extract one, which is, just because we can do something doesn't mean we should do something. I think community, we need to not only, you can look at yourselves, of course, but look at your business and see where this fits in and how you need to evolve your business based on today's world. We're recording this is live in 2025, and what type of impact you can small impact you can make to make transformational differences. So Brian, this was great. Think community, you can reach Brian at his TED Talk, How to Magically Connect with Anyone. You can Google it, 3.6 million views. As of today, you can buy his book, which I just bought as you were talking, 3 New People, on Amazon, and you can reach him at Clarity Up. At clarityupconsulting.com. If you're looking for a recruiter, you can reach Mick and his team at gobrightwing.com. Talent experts to grow your business and hire great people. And you can reach me at jondwoskin.com if you want to talk about any business coaching. Brian, any closing thoughts?
No, I mean, Jon, thank you so much for this, Mick. I mean, this was a wonderful conversation. It got me just reignited thinking about all kinds of really fun, interesting things. So just appreciate the conversation, and let's do this again.
All right, good. Same. Stay on for just a minute. Mick, any closing thoughts?
No, it's nice to meet you, Brian, and thank you. Like I mentioned a couple of years ago, finding your video, and I thought it had a big impact on our organization and what we do, and to meet you and get the chance to talk to you, I appreciate it. So thank you and good luck with everything moving forward. And Jon, thank you for having us. I appreciate it.
Of course, this was great. Thanks for finding the video. Yeah. You started all this, Mick. This is all.
All right. I guess I'll take credit. It's fine.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right, guys. Thank you.